Night Touchdown Podcast with your hosts, Reese Downing and Jacob Workman.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Tuesday Night Touchdown Podcast, NCAA edition, Big 12 Conference Preview. Joining me today, as always, the other side of the screen, Reese. Reese, what's up?
What's going on, brother? How are you?
Pretty good. We're, I think, roughly like 3 weeks from week 0, 4 weeks maybe. It's getting really close now.
Yeah, football's coming in quick. Between week 0 coming up, I'm starting to get emails from people to kick off fantasy league, and it is rapidly approaching. Thank God.
NFL preseason starts less than a week. It's Thursday is the first game, the Hall of Fame game. So I believe I saw a thing that said starting this Thursday, there's not a Thursday without football until I think it said like January or February, something crazy.
Beautiful.
So it's always a good thing. Big 12, we've got a little bit of changes. As always, moving conferences everywhere in college football. Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah are joining the conference this year. Reese, do you have any thoughts on the addition of the 4 new teams?
Yeah, I mean, just more shakeups to these big conferences. Really excited to see what Arizona and Utah specifically are going to do here as they move from the Pac-12 to the Big 12. I know Cam Rising's back. A little surprised that Utah's sitting at the top here. Kansas State deserves respect, despite Will Howard transferring. Oklahoma State's going to be one to watch out for. The team's returning like 20 starters, and I think we're going to get into it a little bit more here. But Colorado, I think, is going to be in for a little bit of a rude awakening this year. It's not an easy schedule, but I think we're going to talk about that here soon.
Yeah, and you mentioned Cam Rising, clone of Wayne's World. We talked about him a lot last year for a man that never played football. He was questionable every single week of the season until I think like week 8 when he finally made an announcement that he was not going to play this year.
Yeah.
And I think I even saw that he's one of the people that are eligible if he wants to. He can still come back next year. And I'm like, how? Like, this guy's been in college. He's 10 years in college, and he can still come back and play again. It's kind of amazing. As you just mentioned, though, Utah is sitting atop the preseason championship odds for the conference and one of the 2 highest win totals at 9.5. I mean, Utah at home is one of the toughest teams in the nation. They don't really lose at home. They did last year a few times, but last year their quarterback situation was pretty crazy. The thing I worry about with Utah this year is, as we just mentioned with Cam Rising and him not playing at all last year, both of their backup quarterbacks that played all year transferred. So if we do have a Cam situation, I'm not sure it's going to go well.
Not the same situation that they had last year.
Yeah, I mean, their defense can only take them so far. And last year, I mean, Nate Johnson, I forget, where did he end up transferring? Vanderbilt, I think it was. I don't remember. I think it was Vandy, one of the 2 guys that went there with. Yeah. I think he went with Pavia, the guy that peed on the logo. But they, I just think that Utah's good. They're putting a lot of faith in Cam Rising staying healthy this year. Kansas State is second at plus 380. Both of them coming in at 9.5. They are plus money on the over, so they are anticipating Kansas State to only win 9, where they are anticipating Utah to win 10. So that's where Utah's getting a little bit of the bump there. Oklahoma State right behind them at 8.5. If they can survive drunk driving, then they'll have a pretty good season, I think. But with the coach admitting he does it all the time, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. And the best player on the team getting arrested for it. I mean, it's kind of a little bit of a situation there. UCF plus 850, bringing in one of the best transfers, KJ Jefferson. I think they're going to have a sneaky good year also. Then we got some interesting situations. Kansas isn't even going to have a home field this year because of some construction going on. They're playing some games at Arrowhead, and they're playing some games at the soccer stadium. I do think that's a little bit of a disadvantage for them. And Jalen Daniels, the quarterback, Jaden Daniels, those names always get to me. With him and Lance Leipold back, I expect Kansas. It's going to be iffy with them at 8.5. Obviously, the under at minus 170, they're expecting them to go under. But they're still one of those teams that are always just sneaky good and fun to watch. Ohio State, Matt Campbell, you know what he does. Texas Tech, Arizona, West Virginia. There are some more up-and-coming teams in college football. Arizona last year had a great year. West Virginia surprisingly had a great year. TCU, Colorado is an interesting one. We talked about them quite a bit last year. Only 5.5 on the win total. They are minus 142 to the over, though, so they are anticipating a bowl berth for them at 6 wins. Cincinnati, Baylor, Houston, those are going to be some interesting situations. I don't think Cincinnati's coach was the right hire when they hired him last year. Baylor has a very tough schedule. I think Dave Aranda is probably going to get fired this year, which is going to be a big change for that program. Houston only at 3.5 wins is a little surprising to me. I love Willie Fritz as a coach, coming over from Tulane, but I just don't think his talent's going to be there yet. I would say in a year or two that team's going to be very good. And then Arizona State and BYU to close it out. Reese, so looking at this, what are some things that stand out to you for the conference championship odds and the season win totals?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a little bit ago. The Utah sitting at the top here, like I said, is a little bit surprising just because of that variable. If Cam Rising can't stay healthy, who are they going to go to? And then you look at the team behind them in Kansas State. We're going to talk about them here in a second, but that team still has a lot of talent on there, despite Will Howard leaving Ohio State. Of all of the other teams on here that I'm interested in. We talked about him a lot, but Fafita and the guys out there at Arizona, that team's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I think Vegas is even saying here, they've got minus on both the over and the under. I don't think they fully know which way this team's going to go. But overall, I think this is pretty much in line. Oklahoma State, again, we talked about that a little bit ago, but they're returning 20 starters. They're a little bit of an unpredictable team, but if they can maintain composure and not get any more DUIs, then they have a possibility of sneaking into the Big 12 tournament or the Big 12 championship.
All right, so let's move on. Who are you picking for your conference champion?
I've got Kansas State here. So I think Utah is the safer choice, but we talked about Will Howard transferring. Avery Johnson's the quarterback there now, and he is an absolute stud. DJ Giddens is back. He rushed for over 1,000 yards last year. They added in Colorado transfer Dylan Edwards, which makes this one of the best backfields in the nation. They've got some transfers on the defensive side coming in as well. And then you look at the schedule. They don't play Utah during the regular season. They get both Kansas and Oklahoma State at home. If this team can keep healthy and win close games, they're going to be a tough out in the Big 12 title. So I've got them at the plus 380 for championship odds.
Yeah. Avery Johnson, he was fun to watch. He came in and actually spelled Will Howard quite a bit last year with his flowing blonde locks, and he was very fun to watch. He usually came in a running aspect, so it'll be interesting to see what all they do with him this year. But yeah, Kansas State, obviously a long-time perennial good team in the Big 12. Be interesting to see how that season ends up for them. So it looks like your win total is going to one of the newcomers in the conference.
Yeah, so I went Utah on the over here. I know we teased a little bit about what happens if Cam Rising's not healthy, but looking at the schedule, they've got favorable matchups throughout the year. The one game I'm eyeing as a potential speed bump is the game in Stillwater against Oklahoma State. Even if they lose that game, they have padding to give up one more with the 9.5 being the over. Arizona is a game I'd circle as a possible second loss, but the Utes are playing at home, which gives them a significant advantage. Like I said, if Cam Rising can stay healthy, there's no reason why this team can't get over the 9.5. And honestly, even if he does get injured, they do have that transfer in Sam Howard or Heward, whatever his name is. He should be serviceable enough to get them over that win total if you look at some of the other opponents that they have here. So I've got Utah over 9.5 as the win total favorite.
So game by game, I know you just mentioned Oklahoma State as a potential. What do you see their final record being?
I right now, the way that I'm looking at this, I've got them having one loss for the season, and that's at Oklahoma State.
So just by looking at it, at Oklahoma State, obviously is going to be one of the tough ones. I feel pretty confident in a lot of those other early season games. The one thing about Oklahoma State, which teaser here for a little bit because I'm going to be talking about them in a minute, but in September they do struggle a little bit, and their September schedule is actually a little tough. But we'll get to that in a minute. At Oklahoma State is one. It's a potential loss. I would say at Colorado is another one you've got to think about late in the season. If Colorado is still potentially halfway decent at that point, then that's one we've got to look at too. Iowa State's going to be a sneaky game. I think that team's very good, and they're a very, very strong defensive team. It's kind of a clash of battle there. I know it will be in Utah, but I think that's a sneaky one. And then depending on how their season's going, if they still have conference championship aspirations or not, but at UCF on Saturday, November 30th is going to be a tough one too. But
yeah, I think they just announced yesterday that the UCF took a 4-star cornerback from Bama. He's transferred and is now going to UCF. So I think we're going to talk about them here in a bit with how they performed in the transfer portal. But yeah, definitely UCF is one of those teams that you always have to watch out for.
Yeah, and even if they were to lose at Oklahoma State, one of the Colorado, Iowa State, and at UCF, that's still only 3.
Yeah.
I guess 3 would be under though.
Yeah, they're only going to be able to use or lose 2 games.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, that one's a little interesting then, because I could see potential losses there. So, yeah, that one will be a fun one to watch. Obviously, the under on that, you're getting where are they at? The under, you're getting plus 132. So if you're out there thinking that they could potentially lose Oklahoma State, Colorado, Iowa State, UCF, I mean, plus 132 to the under is decent money. So play that one how you guys want. Reese has Kansas State to win the Big 12 championship and Utah to go over 9.5 for his favorite win total bet. On mine, so my conference champion, I am rolling with the human video game players themselves, Oklahoma State at plus 850. I really am concerned about the schedule to start the season, but it gets a lot better as the season goes on. They are returning 20 starters, as you mentioned a little bit earlier. Ollie Gordon is back. Their quarterback's 100 years old, Alan Bowman. I think he's kind of the key to this team. If he can just not turn the ball over, this team is loaded everywhere. I think they're going to be a very good team. My other concern is Oklahoma State, when they're supposed to be good, generally shits the bed at some point. So that's another concern too. Is this finally the team that gets over the hump and they do what they're supposed to do? Or are they going to lose to Arizona State on November 2nd? Like it's one of those situations. So hopefully everything comes out. Ollie Gordon is not being suspended. That's been talked about already. Schedule wise, this is where I think it gets tricky. I guess this game's not technically in September. It is October 31st, but starting the year with San Diego or South Dakota State is no joke. They haven't lost a game since week 1 of 2022, and that was a 7-3 loss to Iowa. They've won 29 straight games. This team hasn't lost in almost 2 years. This is not a team you want to be playing to start your season. I don't care how loaded your roster is. So, I mean, I know it's a home game. It's in Stillwater. But that's a sneaky game. I don't know what the line is yet. I can 100% tell you we'll be discussing this game when it is week 1 for that game. And I wouldn't be shocked if I'm not taking South Dakota State in the points. Unless the line is like 3, which I don't think it's going to be. I'm guessing it's probably somewhere more. If I had to guess, this is probably like a 9 to 12 point line, something like that. I think it's going to be less than 2 touchdowns. Arkansas, I like them in the Arkansas game at home. At Tulsa, I like them in that game. But then still in September, we're talking Utah and at Kansas State. Like these are three of their 5 games in, August 31st / September are very, very tough games. I like that the West Virginia game in October is a home game. At BYU is a very, very tricky spot to play, and it's a Friday night. I talk about that all the time. Friday night road games are disasters. At Baylor, I'm not worried about that. I think Dave Aranda will be fired by that game. Arizona State, nothing. At TCU, nothing really. Texas Tech should be easy. And at Colorado, again, like we just mentioned on your rundown, unless Colorado is like really, really still in it, none of these guys are going to be playing for anything at that point. So, I mean, that game could actually be potential bowl berth game for Colorado if they only have 5 wins at that point. But
yeah, and to your point, that's another Friday game. So
it is true. I think that's potentially day after Thanksgiving. Not positive on that, but but yeah, I don't think the Colorado players, to be honest, even care about a bowl game, judging by how a lot of them are. But
that's way for you to say that.
Yeah, I mean, they're half of them are already more concerned about going to the NFL, even though last year they had 0 drafted. So we'll see how that team ends up. UCF is my win total at over 7. Oh, sorry. Let me give you my losses. So Oklahoma State, what I had them losing at Kansas State. I had them losing at BYU, and then a potential loss to South Dakota State, which is only 3 losses. 2 of those would be conference, so that would put them with only 2 conference losses, which I think should get them in the conference championship game still. That's one thing about the Big 12. We didn't even mention this, but this conference is just going to beat the shit out of each other. There are so many good teams in this conference that it's going to be very unpredictable on a weekly basis, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. UCF, so I've got them over 7.5, and it's only minus 105, so it's almost even money for the over with them. So with UCF, we've got Arkansas transfer quarterback KJ Jefferson coming in to lead the Knights. Returning with him is running back RJ Harvey And then joining him was a transfer from Toledo running back Penny Boone, which we mentioned quite a bit when the portal was going on last year. He was actually going to go to Louisville and then ended up going to UCF. The front four on D, they improved, hoping to build a little bit of a better run defense. Their run defense last year was not good. And then they brought in all their linebackers and all their secondary players are pretty much all transfers. So they're doing everything they can to just improve this team through the portal, essentially, which as a Florida State fan, I've seen it work. I can't say it's not a bad thing. So UCF, their schedule, what I have here, well, we'll run down the schedule first. So Thursday, August 29th, they're playing New Hampshire at home. Then they're kicking off the next Saturday with Sam Houston, both home games. First road game is at TCU. Then they're home with Colorado, and they go on the road to Florida, which will be two interesting back-to-back games. Then they get Cincinnati at home. Then they're going to Iowa State, and they've got BYU and Arizona coming to Orlando. Then they're going at Arizona State, at West Virginia, and they're closing it off Friday, November 29th, home against Utah. So my record I have for them here, and this is, I couldn't really determine how I wanted to do this. So I have a maybe. I have two maybes in here. At Florida, I have as their first possible loss. I don't think those first four games are much to worry about at all. And at Florida is tricky because I don't think Florida is that good. And I think the way that UCF plays, I think that they could go in and win this game. So I do have it as a maybe loss, but for the sake of a win total, 50-50, we'll count it as a loss. So we'll say that's their first one. I do think they lose at Iowa State on October 19th. That'll be the second loss. At West Virginia on Saturday, November 23rd, I have as a loss. And then Utah to end the season as a loss, which is only 4 losses with the Florida. And I think the Florida one and the Utah one are both kind of questionable. Those are the ones I think they could easily still win those games. So, but giving them the loss for the sake of the win total, that's still 8-4, which puts them over 7.5 at the minus 105. Reese, you have any thoughts on the Oklahoma State or UCF?
No, I mean, we talked about, Oklahoma State, we've already talked plenty about. On the UCF schedule, we talked about that game at Florida. You know, typically I would say that being in the swamp is going to be a pretty significant advantage for the Gators, but we talked about this when we covered the SEC. Like, their schedule is brutal. So I think it's very possible that if Florida starts the season 0-4 or 1-3, I mean, the top end of their schedule looks a little easier than the back half, but we talked quite a bit about, is Billy Napier going to last throughout the year? I don't think they're going to get rid of him that soon, but it's definitely going to be one of those games where they have to come in and win. And I think that if UCF comes into Florida or comes into Gainesville and beats the Gators, that might put the nail in the coffin for Napier. The Arizona game is one that I would definitely keep an eye out for, just because huge fan of Fafita, and I think that they have an opportunity to come in and win the game then in Orlando. And then you've got that Utah game, man. I picked Utah in the over, but you look at the schedule, man. The schedule is not easy, especially if they're all the way at the end of the season there and they're playing a Friday night game. That could definitely be a trap game for Utah. So, yeah, I could definitely see UCF at the over. Yeah,
and as you mentioned with Florida, I think a lot's gonna, like we've talked about that week 1 game against Miami and Gainesville. I mean, I think that sets the tone for Florida season. I think if they lose that one, it might be over immediately. Like, I don't even know, because they know that what the back end is going to show for that schedule. So we have 16 teams, but only 2 of them have new head coaches this year. Willie Fritz, the new head coach at Houston, coming over from Tulane. He basically turned Tulane into a factor on the national level. He did take them to a New Year's Six bowl. And like I said earlier, I don't think this year is going to be a good year to really judge Willie Fritz. He's a great coach. Just give him time to get the guys in there. And I think Houston's going to be one of those sleepy good teams in just a couple of years. That's a great area to recruit in. And I really like Willie Fritz. I think he's a great head coach. Brent Brennan, I watch a lot of Mountain West football, so I knew him pretty well. He had San Jose State very good the last few years. And now he's going to a team where he's going to inherit Noah Fafita and McMillan, the receiver, which was an absolute stud. That they're very fortunate they were able to keep both of those guys at Arizona and not send them to Washington. Reese, so any thoughts on Willie Fritz and Brent Brennan? And then also, what Big 12 coach do you think has the most pressure on them to win this season?
Yeah, so starting with the coaching changes here, I like both hires. Definitely like Fritz. It was a blast watching him coach Tulane. I don't particularly care for how he resigned ahead of the bowl game to take the Houston job, but I guess it's not really any different than what a lot of these coaches do. I just wish they would stick with their program at least through the end of the season, or set a rule where coaching vacancies can't be filled until after bowl season is completed or something. It's just always frustrating to see that, but I understand why he did it. I really like the Brent Brennan hire. Excited to see what he's going to be able to do with Fafita. We were super high on him last year. We've already talked about him a couple times already, along with McMillan. And they also brought in some strong portal guys as well. So Arizona is going to be a fun team to watch. Pressure-wise, I think the coach that's probably on the hottest seat right now is Matt Campbell at Iowa State. He's going into his 9th season with the Cyclones, and he's only really had one super successful year since he's been there. 38-34 in his 8 seasons. He's only won 2 of their 6 bowl games. At some point, I think Iowa State's probably going to end up pulling the plug, and this may be the year. But outside of Campbell, may not be on the hot seat, but should feel pressure. How about Deion? I mean, I love Deion more than most. He played for the Cowboys and the Braves, Florida State guy, a lot of charisma. Colorado is going to give him more than 2 years to fix the program, but they're going to have to do better than 4-8 and 1-8 in conference play, which is what they did last year, especially with Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, both undoubtedly heading to the draft after this season. He is probably going to be feeling some pressure. So the 2 guys are Matt Campbell and Deion.
Yeah, and I kind of spoiled mine a little earlier. I said Dave Aranda is going to be fired in the middle of the. I think Baylor coach Dave Aranda. I just don't think he's going to survive. They haven't been winning, and Baylor's been a program that traditionally has at least been winning. Like I just don't like what Aranda's doing there. I actually had Deion as my second, also just for that aspect of there's all this hype, but I agree. I agree with you what you said. They're not getting rid of him. There's no way they're getting rid of him, but you need to actually do something. Especially with his lack of recruiting. Like, he doesn't recruit. So he expects people to come to him in Colorado. He will not go out and try to recruit anyone, which is amazing to me. But maybe him and Dabo can ride the train out of town the same day, because they both don't want to seem to figure out how college football actually works in these days. Some people are making a big deal out of him hiring Warren Sapp, and I think that's a bigger disaster than anything. Like, why would you hire a guy who's a complete jackass to be on your coaching staff and make your attitudes worse? Like, I don't know. I don't think Deion's doing anything the correct way in Colorado. I don't know. It's very difficult to say, because they do have 2 of the better players in college football. I think Shedeur is a very much overrated quarterback. I think he's good, but who the hell has he ever played against? Like, he hasn't proven anything against anyone worth a damn yet. And Travis Hunter got abused by Stanford's number 1 wide receiver last year to the tone of taking them to overtime. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of overhype for these guys also. Travis Hunter, obviously, I'm a little bit, I have some hatred towards, because he's committed to Florida State forever and then decided to go to asshole state D7 school and be nothing. So now that he's lucky enough to be at Colorado, we'll see what happens. He's kind of right now just all name and no talk. I mean, yeah, he had some picks, but he also had some picks like week 2. Like, I don't know. I'm not as big on this team as anyone, but so while we're mentioning Colorado, let's just go ahead and do a little run through. So they have, let me look at their win total. Colorado's win total this year is 5.5 with -142 to the over. So Vegas is thinking Colorado is going to get to 6 wins and make a bowl. But at +116 to the under, I mean, that's really not that great of odds either. So it seems like they've got them pretty much right at that 5 to 6 win spot. They are +2,500 to win the conference. Reese, let's do a little game by game real quick and tell me what you think of what we can get their record to. So they're going to kick off the year Thursday, August 29th. And I mentioned South Dakota State earlier with Oklahoma State. Colorado is playing North Dakota State on a Thursday night, 8 p.m. on primetime ESPN to kick off the season. What do you think about that game?
I've got it as a W to start the year off. Thursday night game, obviously a night game. Is this the only game that's on that Thursday?
I don't think so. I think there will be a few others, but
well, I mean, either way, there's so much made up hype about this team that there's going to be a lot of eyeballs. And this is obviously going to be a home game for Colorado. So I'll give them the W in week 1.
Yeah, I think I'm going to give them the W too, just because, I mean, talent wise, they should have more talent, but I think coaching and discipline wise and just longevity of how good they are, I think North Dakota State's a very good team. This is another one I could see this line probably being around 10 points, just like that Oklahoma State game I was talking about. So the next week, they're going to Nebraska on a Nebraska team that actually had quite a bit of offseason success too. And that's going to be a primetime NBC game Saturday night, September 7th. What do you think of that one?
This is going to be a tough win for Colorado. Matt Rule, another year in there, being able to put his program in place. They got who's the quarterback that
Dylan Raiola.
Yeah. I have this game down as a loss in Nebraska. 7:30 night game. A lot of eyeballs on this game as well. I have Colorado losing their first game in week 2.
All right, so we're both going to have them 1-1. I think there's no way they get out of North Dakota State and at Nebraska without a loss. So I like the 1-1 there. Then next, they're going on the road, and this is not a neutral site like it has been recently. At Colorado State, we know there was some history last year when Norvell said some shit about Deion wearing sunglasses and all that, and it became a thing. And then Colorado State went out and put up a hell of a performance against them. This one, again, getting the primetime treatment, CBS on a Saturday night at 7:30. This is a sneaky game to me. This Colorado State, this is their Super Bowl. So I'm going to give Colorado a win here and put them at 2-1. What do you think?
It's not going to be an easy game for them to win. I've got them winning, but I mean, they've got Braden Fowler, whatever the hell the second part of his last name is. He had 3,400 passing yards and 22 touchdowns last year. They've got an All-American receiver in Torrey Horton, and it's a road game, so it's not going to be an easy win. I do have Buffalo winning that, the Colorado Buffaloes winning that.
Yeah.
But, it's not going to be an easy, definitely not a surefire win.
So we got them at 2-1. I think this one is a safe win for the reasons I've just talked about Dave Aranda. So I'm going to go 3-1. You got that with Baylor?
Yep.
So here's where it gets tricky. I don't think they win any of the next 3. I think they lose at UCF. I think they lose to Kansas State. And I think they lose to Arizona. So to me, that puts them at, 3-4?
Yep.
And what do you have them at after that?
3-4. Yeah, I just don't. That UCF game we already talked about versus Kansas State. Kansas State's going to come into Colorado, but Kansas State is a good football team, and I think they're going to show a lot of efficiencies on the Buffalo side. And then at Arizona, all of these games, interestingly enough, or from what I'm seeing anywhere, a lot of these, as far as time slots go, is to be determined. So I think that these games are going to flex depending on how poorly or how well Colorado is playing. But let's assume, with that being a West Coast game, that's going to be a night game in Arizona. I don't see Colorado getting out of that with a win. So I've got the next 3 of those games also as losses.
So we're both at 3-4 then, right?
Yep.
Cincinnati and Colorado, I will give them a win. So I'm going to go 4-4.
Yep, same.
Lose at Texas Tech, 4-5.
I've got this as a star game. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt here and say that they squeak out a win, even though it's in Texas Tech. So I'll go to 5-4 here. So this is the first one that we're flip-flopping on.
And then I've got them losing the next 2. I've got them losing to Utah and at Kansas, which will be at Arrowhead. So I've got them, 4-7?
I have 4-7. I've got them at 5-6, and I don't have them winning a game after Texas Tech.
So you have them losing to Oklahoma State to close out the year, which would put them at 5-7 on the season?
Yep.
I have them losing to Oklahoma State also, so I got them at 4-8, I think it was. So
that's the under on both, right?
Yeah, 5.5 was it. So we're both on the under, which would be plus 116. I'm very interested to see, and we actually gave them the benefit of the doubt on some games that I'm not sure they're going to win. So, I guess maybe they could win one of the ones we said they wouldn't. Maybe like that Kansas game or Texas Tech, especially because Kansas is a neutral site at Arrowhead. But I don't know. I don't think they're going to be that good again, and it'll be interesting to see how the media reacts to another shitty season in Colorado. All right, so going back to the Big 12, we got some impact transfers and portal class rankings. So Colorado, like we just mentioned, they were the 8th class in the portal rankings. Again, they didn't really recruit anyone, so anything they did was through the portal, and they also lost quite a bit in the portal too. UCF was 22nd, TCU was 25th, so only 3 teams in the Big 12 are coming in the top 25 in portal rankings. Some of the bigger name transfer quarterbacks, I mentioned earlier, KJ Jefferson from Arkansas is now at UCF. DeQuan Finn, which we talked about a little bit last year from Toledo, he's at Baylor now, so see what he can do. Brendan Sorsby from IU is now at Cincinnati. Sam Levitt from Michigan State is now at Arizona State. Jeff Sims, which he was one of the bigger recruits, he's been all over the nation. He was at Nebraska last year. Now he's going out to be with Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State. Ja'Curry Brown at Miami is now at UCF. And Zion Chris from Louisiana is now at Houston. Some of the other notable players, Vanderbilt wide receiver Will Shepard is now at Colorado. Pitt defensive end Samuel Okalola is at Colorado. Jalen Conyers, tight end from Arizona State, is now at Texas Tech. Quincy Wiggins from LSU, defensive end, going to Colorado. Weber State edge Jack Kelly is going to BYU. This one's a name here, Najalik Kelly. He's from Miami. He's gonna be an edge at UCF. Corey Platt from Tulane. He's going to be at Houston. Followed Willie Fritz there. Dylan Edwards from Colorado, as you mentioned earlier, running back. He's going to be at Kansas State. North Dakota offensive tackle Easton Kilty is going to Kansas State, and Houston offensive guard Tyler Johnson is going to be at Colorado. So obviously a lot of these guys were going to Colorado. It's why they were one of the top classes in the nation. What are your thoughts on the transfer classes?
A little surprised. I mean, well done to UCF and TCU for finishing in the top 25 for both of those programs, especially considering all the other teams that they're competing against to try to land those transfers. A lot of fun names here. KJ Jefferson will be fun to watch in Malzahn's offense. DeQuan Finn will certainly help out at Baylor as far as that offense is going. And as a Cardinals fan, I'm glad that he's not at Toledo anymore. A couple names not mentioned here to keep an eye out are guys like BJ Green, defensive lineman. He's at Colorado now. That came from Arizona State. Another defensive lineman, Dayon Hayes, also transferring to Colorado, but he came from Pitt. That's 2 upgrades on the defensive front for Coach Prime. So just a couple extra names to keep an eye out for there. But again, another transfer class that's got some solid quarterbacks coming in.
All right, so we're going to move on to our top 5 conference games. Reese, what is your number 5 game?
My number 5 game is Arizona at Utah, September 28th. Arizona doesn't have an easy schedule in September. It ends up with this behemoth of a matchup. Utah's won 6 straight before Arizona got the W in Tucson last year, and pretty handily at that. I think they won like 42-18. But it's going to be a blast to watch Fafita go up against this defense. So my number 5 game is Arizona at Utah, September 28th.
So that one is on my list a little later, but for right now, I do have Utah at UCF. November 29th is my 5th game. I think that one's going to go a long way for both teams. Obviously, my win total, like we were talking about, but Utah on the road in Orlando late in November. It'd be interesting to see. Is there a team that's generally a more powerful team at home, traveling to what will probably be a much different climate in Orlando than what they're dealing with in Utah at that point? Number 4, I have Kansas State at Iowa State, November 30th, that same weekend. Another huge game and potentially conference championship berth game. Kansas State's going to be one of the better teams in the conference. I do have a lot of faith in Iowa State this year. Matt Campbell, the defense is going to be good. Kansas State, like I said, 2 of the better teams in the conference late in the year. And you even mentioned this could be a game for Matt Campbell's job, too. So we'll see what happens with that one. What is your number 4 game?
My number 4 game is Oklahoma State at Kansas State. Again, September 28th. September 28th is going to be a good one. Oklahoma State won a close one in Stillwater last year. Wildcats come in looking to get some revenge. Mike Gundy and that head of hair going to look in and try to give Avery Johnson some problems. So we'll see how that one shakes out. This is the first of 3 Kansas State games that I actually have circled, but this is my number 4.
Yeah, so my 3 and my 2 are games you've already mentioned. They're both the September 28 games, Arizona at Utah, Oklahoma State at Kansas State. Those were my 3 and 2. You just talked about them. We really don't need to get into them. They're huge games in the conferences. Really, in this conference, like I said, almost every game is a huge game in this conference. It's a crazy tight conference. What were your 3 and 2?
My number 3, I've got Arizona at Kansas State, September 13th. We talked about both of these teams already, but this is an early slated game on the schedule. It'll be a lot of fun to watch Fafita and Johnson shoot out. Key here is going to be whether or not Zona can control the defensive line of scrimmage and slow down the running attack. So that's what I have as the number 3 game. Number 2, I have Kansas at Kansas State, October 26th. Kansas State's won 15 straight in the Sunflower Showdown. This one being in the bill is going to make it hard for Kansas to break that streak. I'm really looking forward to watching Jalen Daniels battle it out against Avery Johnson. So that's my number 2 game. It's Kansas at Kansas State.
Yeah, so this leads me to believe we both have the same number 1. I've got Utah at Oklahoma State on September 21st.
Yep.
That's I I think this game is for a conference championship berth. I know it's early in the season, but the loser of this one's going to be putting themselves behind quite a bit. Very good game though, and probably the most anticipated one of the conference that isn't involving Colorado in the national media.
Yeah, this game would have been, I think, potentially even more fun to watch if it were at Rice Eccles. But even with this being in Stillwater, it's going to be a blast. So yeah, that's my number one game as well.
All right. So Big 12 offensive and defensive player of the year predictions. Who is your offensive player of the year?
I'm going easy with offensive player of the year. I'm going with Cam Rising. If he can stay healthy, he should be well within both the running for the Big 12 title and a Big 12 offensive player of the year. A couple of other guys to keep an eye out. I've got Avery Johnson, quarterback at Kansas State, Ollie Gordon at Oklahoma State. And if Colorado can play well above their expectations, Shedeur has a chance to win it, but I think that's going to be a long shot if they don't blow that over under out of the water, which we just talked about being a possibility. So
yeah, so my offensive player of the year, I did go with Ollie Gordon. I just think with what they're bringing back, the experience, the team's loaded, I think he's in for an absolute huge year. Defensive player of the year, who do you have?
Yeah, so I'm sticking with Oklahoma State here. I've got Colin Oliver, outside linebacker, absolute stud. He's all over the field, racks up stats from sacks and tackles for losses, pass breakups, forced fumbles. A couple other guys to keep a lookout for. Takario Davis, cornerback at Arizona. He led the Pac-12 last year with 15 pass breakups and 16 passes defended. Travis Hunter, I think, has to be mentioned. As much as I know you love the guy, he is a playmaker. If Colorado plays above expectations, then he could be in the conversation. But I've got Colin Oliver, outside linebacker at Oklahoma State.
Yeah, so my pick is based off of the media. I did pick Travis Hunter because I feel like if he does anything, he's going to win it, just because that's what they love to do. So I did go Travis Hunter for defensive player of the year. Big 12 championship game, and who wins it?
My Big 12 championship prediction is Utah versus Kansas State. I thought about slotting Oklahoma State here instead of Kansas State, but I think Kansas State's just a more predictable team. We talked about that a little bit, about how Oklahoma State's pretty unpredictable at times. I think they're a little bit more well-rounded. Oklahoma State needs to show more on the defensive side of the ball, but anyway, I'm going with Utah versus Kansas State here. I'm going to maybe surprise you a little bit here, though, and go with Kansas State getting the W, even though we kind of teased it earlier. I think if they can keep the ground and pound game going and keep the ball out of Cam Rising's hands, they have a chance to win it. So I've got Kansas State winning the title, final score 31-28.
So I actually have a rematch from our September 21st battle. I've got Oklahoma State facing Utah again, this time at Jerry World, which is still not in Utah. So I like Oklahoma State again. I like Oklahoma State to come in and win the conference. And like I said, get over that hump that they've been struggling for the last few. Anytime they're supposed to be good, they always find that way to just make themselves a disaster at some point. I do think this is the year we finally see them get over it. So I like Oklahoma State to win the Big 12. So that's going to be it for our Big 12 conference preview. Anything else you have, Reese?
No, excited to get everything kicked off here. Just to let everybody know, I don't know if we were going to talk about this or not, but obviously we missed the Tuesday release of a couple of these shows, had a scheduling conflict, but you guys are going to get 4 shows this week. So keep an eye out for that. We've got 2 NFL and 2 NCAA shows coming out, this being one of them. So yeah, looking forward to stopping with all these season previews and getting going here, starting to pick some spreads.
Yeah. And like I said, there were some very good win total odds in this episode. So we get your bets in now, because these lines will change. And I think there's some very winnable bets in this conference. Well, that's going to wrap up the Big 12 preview. Like, subscribe, share everything. Send us some comments. We do read them. Some of them we'll get back to. Some of them are hilarious. To the man in Virginia Tech that says they don't say "va," we find that hilarious. So please keep commenting. We enjoy it. So that is it. We will be back in just a few days, actually, with our Group of 5 and Notre Dame previews. You guys will see that drop here very soon. So for Reese Downing, I am Jacob Workman, Tuesday Night Touchdown Podcast. We will see you guys soon.